أهلا. شو بدك؟ شو بدك؟ شو أهلا؟ مرحبا. فكرة مجموعة الديكتافون.
The idea of the Dictaphone group started in 2009 in an apartment in London when we decided to launch a project for public interest in Lebanon, where we worked on performance and urban life, both linked to our specialty, because we found that the two practices are concerned with public space and we can also, by examining it, interfere directly with the space. We set specific goals and we worked on it and a kind of manifesto when we started our work. We decided to rely on research in order to undertake artistic empirical projects and share it first in Arabic with people, and then they were translated into other languages, and use a language and some non-investigatory audiovisual means, and also in spaces that are open to everybody, and the public was the public of cultural institutions. And we wanted to get out of Beirut because the industry of art is concentrated in the capital city, and I forget about the periphery. We will be talking about the periphery now, where we come from, Akkar, the south of the and Mount Lebanon, the periphery of the city, the internal and external borders, and we will share with you some of the stories we had while we were working during the last 6 years. Some I worked on with Habir and some with Petra, like Nothing to Declare, which is displayed here in Homework 7. It is in a room facing this room, and it is shown in Arabic and then in English. You have the hours outside, and it seems that this timetable is not always applied. There's a problem with the sound, there's an echo. There is a theory in psychology that says that in cases of strong trauma, in order to get out of this trauma, we can, for some moments, get out of our body and see what's happening underneath in our bodies. And this is how we can assimilate the size of the trauma and protect ourselves. This is what we decided in the first project we worked together on. We considered that our cities bear many of the qualifications and possibilities of trauma. We took the public in the telepheric. We went up 500 meters over the coast. We went through the mountain. We took a deep breath. We looked at the city from above. This was relying mainly on a sentence we read in a book by Jack Dabbit that says the problem now is to know whether we still can imagine a city. We constituted this map from aerospatial photos of the city, and we set the barriers, the sea barriers that grew in number since the war till now. This was a project to understand, that helped us to understand how our cities, the Mediterranean cities, turned their back to the sea and transformed their relationship with the sea between an intimate one to a consumering one and elitistic one, and how our cities preferred investments of the ruling class rather than public health for the ordinary classes. We took the wagon of this telepheric and we shared these ideas in a tourist trip telling the story and the history of corruption and militia corruption on the coast. They are suspended in the air, so they are not on Lebanese territory, so they are not censored. they are called to look at scenery from above as a main step and a first attempt to try to reimagine the city. This was the first project we worked on, which was called site-specific. It uses the whole city as a scenography for the show with the lightings. It depends on the time of the day, with the people crossing the streets, etc. They impose themselves sometimes on the show. This project shed the light on the chaotic aspect of political decisions in Lebanon. Jounieh witnessed during the civil war a very violent and aggressive urban area, and the city was considered as a Christian city, and most of the projects were built on the coast and some even on the rail track. These changes did not take place during and because of the war only. They follow an urban planning that dates back to 1962 that allows the use of 80% of the space of the area of the real estate, which is very high as a percentage, which led to the distortion of the mountain facing the sea, which was transformed into the situation it is in now, after having been a forest of pine trees. The irony is that in 1995, the Speaker of the Parliament, Amir Berri, was having lunch at ATCL, which was one of the first projects that distorted the image and the form of the Jounieh Bay, that was mentioned by Lamartine, the French writer Lamartine, as the best bay in the world, the most beautiful bay in the world. It seems that Mr. Berri felt really sorry, and when he saw the mountain, that this is how the decision was made to stop this chaos and decided urban planning. 80% of the coastal area of from the Jounieh port to the airport of Beirut are private properties, which are the ownership of political authorities holders. This is how we see the cities all over the coast, and we chose the telepherique because it is used as a means of transportation for people who go and visit Harissa Notre Dame sanctuary, and those who live in Harissa and live in Jounieh, they use it as a means of transportation, because this is faster than a car. Our interest in public transportation, or the lack of public transportation, is as important as our interest to public spaces that are open to everybody, and this will remain with us in the following projects. We will not be able to talk about them today. And those projects took place in a telepheric wagon, or on a fishing boat, in one of the non-functional buses that are parked in the bus parking lot in Maram Khail area, and also on the train railway tracks that was stopped gradually between the 70s and the 90s. And of course on foot as a means of transportation, with some public trying to follow a track that is disappearing day after day. The city as unwanted in it. We met Abu Hussein when we were in a cafe with Abu Adal in Dalia. He told us that he was one of the 10 fishermen who were kicked out from their sea rooms under the Grand Cafe. He had been there for 40 years, and the cafe was there since then, but it had a different shape. And then in 2001, the owners of the Grand Cafe decided to change the decoration in order for the place to become very classy. This is what Abu Hussein said. The new clients do not fit with us fishermen. So they were kicked out with $4,000 compensation for each. Now the Dalier fishermen are facing the same battle. The port that dates back to the 50s is threatened by a real estate project in Dalier. Every site on the coast of Beirut has a story. But this methodological closure of the coast did not affect the fishermen only, it affected also a big category of people on the sea. We had two main questions we wanted to answer in the project The Sea is Mine in 2009. How these compounds were created and how can we create this kind of relationship and experience between the public and the sea. We decided to have a project, which is a trip in which we take the public in a boat, fishing boat, from Ain Mreise to Dalier in order to try to draw the history and the situation and the reality of every site on the coast of Beirut. We started with Zaytuna Bay, which was very clearly drawn, and the borders were very clearly drawn, and then we continued to complexes during which and resorts that allowed us to see that all the resorts and the violations on the coast took place, and not only as a violation during the Civil War. We understood that part of those resorts, like the Sporting, Riviera, and the AUB beach, they were done in the 60s with a decree allowing this. At that time, Beirut was being promoted as a coastal city equaling European coastal cities in terms of tourism. Tourism and services were being set as a priority for growth and economy. At that time, many laws were adopted allowing building on the coast, including the 1966 decree that allowed the owners of the coastal real estates to use the public areas, sea areas, for encouraging tourism in the country. Of those, I mentioned Sporting, Riviera, the AUB beach. During the war, they exceeded what was allowed even and went further in terms of violations. But they were always relying on this decree that is contradictory with the free access concept to the sea. What is really controversial is that most of the violations on the coast took place after the end of the Civil War, like the military beach and places like Dalia and Ramlet El Baida that we can see here. We see the types in dark blue. It is a company, real estate companies. They were bought in the 90s with a change in the laws in order to allow for them to become part of the investment space. We drew this information on the map that you can see that explained how the beach is divided and how the borders were established on it all along this coast, and the show allowed to re-establish a contact that was lost with the sea outside the hegemony of the private resorts. We used legal and research matter as a weapon during the show, and we took the public on a fishing boat, and we crossed the borders that was made by all the resorts, and we swam in places that you usually pay for when we want to use, and we put our bodies and the bodies of the public in an unwanted place, in a place where we are unwanted and undesired, and the work was transformed into a protest. And we were able to see the city from the perspective of the sea. The eastern borders, stories of Riyak. After the show, Nothing to Declare, we decided to go to the line on the train track in order to write a story of the rail track. And we were collecting documents in addition to our observation. Tanya went to the north, Abir went to the south, and I went to the east from Marem Khail Naher in Beirut to Riyak in the Bekaa. This is the method of research we used in all the shows, but in this show we decided to document the trip of the research and to use everything we collected in a text that tells the story of and the history of a country through the train track that used to link Lebanon to the neighboring countries. In my trip from Al Mkhail station, I went through stations, train stations in حدث بعبدة جمهور عريا علي بحمدون سوفر مديرج دهر البيدر مريجات شتورة معلقة زحلة سعد نايل till I reached the station of Riyak. A wide green space with trains parked and we found sheep playing in the train. And the main building with two wagons that are still there and a big building for the station, which was the factory. They used to repair the trains there and produce. They used to fabricate and make trains there. In all the green space you see trains stopping, like the time has stopped at a moment while they weren't prepared for it. That moment is like any moment that was told after the civil war, when they told us we left everything on as they where they were. Everything was left there, but it was added to it a violent history, like torturing of detainees in the wagons, theft of trains and materials in a factory, and also when the Syrian soldiers came and transformed this place, the station, into the main headquarters for the their secret services. This is what the people in Riyadh told us, and also all former workers of the station who witnessed the events from the moment of entry of the Syrian army to the station till their departure in 2006. The station was built under the Ottoman era. It was a point of contact between Beirut and the inland of the Ottoman Empire. Under the French mandate, Riyadh was prosperous because the airport of Riyadh was the main air force headquarters for the French in Lebanon and Syria. So they did plans for the main roads in Riyadh. They established an institute for agricultural research and buildings also that are still there. They even changed the name. It was called Haush Hola, and they called it Riyak, coming from Rai in French, rail. The area of the station compared to the area of Riyak, as you can see, I can turn a little bit to speak, is small, but it was essential for the development and prosperity of the whole region. Many people coming from the Bekaa area moved to Riyadh to work in it, in agriculture, in the station, and in the airport. This is how demographically the region grew, and urbanism too. But after independence, according to a woman we met during our trip, the region was transferred from a service-based city that was prosperous in the Bekaa to a marginalized border city. The station that used to link Lebanon to inside Syria, and from there to other Arab countries, Turkey and Europe, people did not need visas. The train used to cross borders that weren't called so. But during my trip to the Bekaa, in the framework of our project, I could not even reach the eastern borders. Those borders are not like the Masna border that are arid. Those borders are green. Those borders have become imagined spaces of battles, of moving of fighters from both sides without visas. Areas that we know only about in the stories that are told by the people of the border areas, and security that plays the role of observers only. And those stories are heard and transferred by word of mouth with no pictures. Those borders are imagined borders now of a space that was supposed to be a transportation or circulation space into a non-transit space. between the station of Riyak and the station of Sergaya, that is situated exactly on the Lebanese eastern borders, I saw trains moving towards Syria, but stopped. Like me, they were heading towards Syria. They stopped at a certain moment, and I stopped at a certain moment too. I stopped because I cannot reach the borders because, as I was told, there are battles taking place between the Hezbollah and the Free Syrian Army at that time. I stopped and I remember the story of the last train that crossed the Eastern Line in 1976. With these words, the driver of the train tells the story. I was going out from Beirut. I reached Karm Zaytun. I find fightings everywhere, armed men everywhere, and they told me to come back. I came back and I called the station and I came back backward, and then the 16th Brigade told me you can come back because it was open now. I went up again. The road is empty. I reached Hadas and nobody's there. Araya, no one is there. No one at all. In Alay, the emirs had left, and I Marajat, I saw a woman. She told me, "Where are you going? Are you crazy? Missiles and bombs are everywhere in Zahli." I continued to Sadnail. In there, I found the Dushkas and militiamen standing there. I went with the train, and then until they flew in Riyadh. I left the train there, and the train is still there where I left it. I continued on the same road, followed by the last train on the South Line in 1982 after the invasion. This is how the driver of the train told the story. The train department asked me to transport fuel from Zahrani to the station of Jiye, to the power plant of Jiye. I was driving the train and I saw Israeli soldiers. They started shooting at me. I put my hand on the window and I asked them, "What do you want?" They were two. One of them spoke Arabic. He asked me, "Where are you going?" I said, "I was going to get fuel from Zahrani to electricity." He said, "Who said?" The captain called Kfarfalus, and the captain said, "Go," with his Israeli accent. I looked at him and I told him, "Captain, I'm a captain like you. You drive a plane, I drive a train. We cannot say ruch with your accent. Haven't you gone to the school?" He laughed. And he wanted to have a picture with me, and this is how we continued, and we had 1,500 tons of fuels, and this was the last train. I went up to the north in 1980 with the last train that crossed to the north. This is how the driver of the train told the story.
The director general asked that I should open a train line from Beirut to Batroun. I asked, "How can I go to Batroun? There are Syrians there." He said, "Don't worry, they know that you will be crossing their checkpoints at Matfoun bridge." We went there, and on my way, I crossed Lebanese army checkpoint and then Lebanese forces checkpoint. Then I reached the Syrian checkpoint. I said, "Hello, you know that I want to cross. Can you just take away the sand bags from the trail, from the rail?" They did. I went to Batroun and it sounded like a movie. The people were shouting and screaming of joy, and I was blowing the horn and they were waving to me. Actually, poor of them. They thought that the war was over because they saw the train reaching their way. The second day, we took the same road. We reached the Matfoun checkpoint. They were putting the dushkas or the blocks, and we asked them, "What's wrong, for God's sake?" And we would say, and she's saying it in the Lebanese dialect and with the accent. They said, "Where are you going?" We said, "To Batroun." They said, "You have an order for that?" We said, "Yes, we have a pass." and the Syrian, from whom? We said from the state, and the Syrian soldier started insulting us, and he said, well, you and your state, you go away. And then we went back and we crossed the Lebanese forces checkpoint, and they were laughing. They said, oh, you're coming back. That was the last train on the north line. Now, personal map of Saida. What is amazing is that Saida is witnessing what happened to Beirut in the 90s. A satellite image of the city can show and prove that. You have a big deck for yachts, and you have also waste dumped in the sea in order to be transformed into embankments for 650 meters or square meters of land. Our starting point was an old image that we found at the Arab Image Foundation for Saida. Actually, these pictures are important not because of our nostalgia of the past, but in order for us to work within workshops with people from Saida, and we undertook research about this area. One of those places was the so-called holiday sea during the Al-Fitr and Al-Adha holidays. This space that we see in this picture has been erased when the highway was built in the 90s. It was supposed to be the southern highway, and it separated the old city from the sea and destroyed large parts of it. So, we developed our work on Saida through specific areas, and the participants to the project who come from Saida wanted to work on a given area. For instance, the Kinayat, which is the Kinine space, large Kinine space along the Awali River, where the families would meet and would come from Beirut, the south and the north. And the last 2 years, there was an enclosure that was created, and then the old owners, the former owners of the gardens, were no longer the owners, and they sold them to very rich people there who worked also on the harbor, a place on the Skandar or Alexander Bay that was one of the gathering places for the families. It is full of ruins, and this is where a large deck is being created to be transformed into a marina for the yachts. And we also worked on the area of the salty sea. It would be full of workshops, and it was destroyed since the 80s, and now the big destruction is taking place. And then we have the Nabi Yahya area that was on the hill that would overhang the sea and well as the city, and the Nowruz festival would take place for the Kurds who live in Saida. And last 20 years it was or the land was built on, or buildings were built on this land. So each one of the participants was working on each one of these areas I mentioned. There is another location I never mentioned. It is the northern beach that is subject to a large debate in Saida. It is the sandy northern beach of Saida. In the 40s, there was a built hotel. It was the Sidon hotel that was destroyed by Israel in 1982, and since then the square was open to people, and people would go there to walk around. And today there is a debate in Saida, and the local authority, i.e. the municipality, is trying to rebuild this hotel by betting on the nostalgia to the city and convincing people to turn this city into a city similar to that of similar to Beirut. Besides, lots of laws have been modified in order to allow the buildings on this beach. So, One of the major issue was this debate that is taking place and that is part of the project that Alia is going to talk about. Mashit Dalik, let me show you, is a project we had with amateurs. We adopted our own way of work, and we had workshops on the interactive living art as well as on urban research and oral history. We have a brochure that you can have access to here, and we researched an incident that happened in Kinayat al-Bahar. It is a neglected area that is cordoned off, but there is a place that people can cross. We convinced the municipality to use this place that is full of quinine trees and that overhangs the beach. Each one of the participants would have an interactive show on one of the Saida sites. And instead of praising the old and authentic history of city and the creation of this narrative about the authentic Lebanese, the project is about the historic and current relationship of the people with the beach. One of the exercises was a part of this show consisted of drawing personal maps on each one's perspective, how they imagine Saida, which shop they would like to stop at. Each one had their own narrative of the place, and hence this title, Mashi Tadalik. Let me show you. Let me show you, for instance, my favorite place, which is a theater that overhangs the sea, and from there you go from one of the fields, of the cactus fields, reaching the hill of Saint Elias. Now we are promised to have a public garden and a marina for the yachts under the slogan, "The dream has come true and the mountain has become a garden." Three shows took the shape of audio excerpts where we could hear the public or the people swinging or sitting in under the quinine trees. You would drive them along to Jurt al-Wahash, Jurat al-Jamal, places they don't know, in addition to going with them to the annual popular festival which is called the Holiday Sea. One of the shows asked the public to send a letter to the municipality asking to know who owns the land, the rambled land, and that is supposed to cover 650,000 square meters, and it is a place where the waste is being dumped. One of the other shows is to call people to reverse a boat, a fishing boat with a Palestinian guy who is from Saida and whose grandfather came from Palestine and who had his own boat and who was a fisherman, but himself was not a fisherman, and he said that this is due to the fact that the sea is no longer or does not any longer ensure a livelihood or allow to give to equal living. Hello, can you hear me? Can you please, or you can increase the sound of your headphones? I'm going to walk in front of you. This is where our tour starts, in front of the Sursuk Palace. The Sursuk were not always living here. Actually, the Sursuk family comes from Turkey, where the Ottoman Empire authorities sent them to collect the taxes, and they used to live in Berbera, in Byblos, on land owned by the Sultan. And in the 19th century, they moved to Beirut. They were part of the families with businessmen who made a lot of money and who were a liaison between European companies as well as foreign embassies on the one hand and the farmers on the other hand. But our story is not about the Sursuk family, but rather about Salwa, who used to work for this family and who would go from the palace, from the Sursuk palace to her place in Karantina. This is how our tour started. As a starting point was the Sursuk museum last month. The authority of the museum asked us to have an artistic opening. So we had this tour from the Sursuk palace to the Karantina. Salwa was born in Karantina in a family who moved from the Beka in the 20s to work at the port. During our tour, we talked about people that Salwa knew and we talked about locations she used to go to. And we went down the different parts or layers of the historical and social city, from the high hills of Beirut to the bottom lines to Karantina, and we crossed the room or the Orthodox neighborhood that was a summer place for rich people and then was a place for Christian families. And other people who worked at the electricity of Lebanon or at the railways or at the port in the 50s. And then we crossed the Mas'ad and the Jahara stairs until we reached Quarantine, which was farmland on the sea, known for its beautiful sandy beach, and it was like that until 1922 when 10,000 Armenian refugees settled down and in the 30s they moved to Burj Hamoud. Then Karantina was a place for poor Lebanese, and this is where Salwa lived and died. The Arabs also would live in the so-called Khudr neighborhood in the Quarantine, because there was the slaughterhouse in Quarantine and they used to breed livestock or to deal with livestock, and it was called the slaughterhouse, a name that they detested. They would settle down there because on Fridays they would go to the Mosque Al Khudr. In the 50s, the highway was built, which separated between the mosque and the Al Khudr neighborhood. And during the 50s, they would run across the cars to reach the mosque until 2004, when they got and when they were naturalized, and they got this footbridge that was built for them in order to get their votes. And this is where the tour ended. And it was a line between the so-called bottom and upper parts of the city.
أقدر أتحرك. متى وقعت تلك العقود؟
When these shows take place, going back to nothing to declare. So I told you that from Beirut I took my car to Riyak and I followed the train line. I would notice that the roads taken by the train were beautiful. It would cross the mountains or agricultural lands and sometimes the houses. So this tour was amazing, but it wasn't similar to any of the tours or the trips I had to Bekaa. I would go to Bekaa, but I would see places I never saw before, and I would see train stations I wouldn't be aware of their existence. So this trip was part of the research, but it was filmed. This tour is not similar to any other because I know that I'm a filmmaker filming myself and I'm playing a role. I'm discovering, I'm exploring. Yes, I am exploring. I am documenting my experience. I'm documenting what I am seeing. I am documenting my role as a Petra, where I'm looking for the railways and the train stations. And this is when the Nothing to Declare show took place during the filming. We had a Sony 150 camera with the car, and the public was every person we would run into on the road, be it army soldiers or the people there, or the former employees of the railways. And in each show, the public would decide of the process or of the direction of the show. For instance, when the army stopped me twice, decided to delete two excerpts of the spectacle or the show. And during that process, they had the first watching of this show. They watched my performance as well as the image of the Lebanese army that is being represented in that show. Of course, I was asked to delete those two parts with my help, of course. So I was there when these two excerpts were deleted and erased. So the editing took place during the filming, and other barriers were added to the movie, to the trip, to the public, I mean yourselves. The camera was a danger for the image that represented the army or the image of the train railways. For instance, the Transport Authority would allow us to film if we pay, because if we pay, we would compensate for the bad image about the train. As far as the image of the army is concerned, it cannot be sold, so it has to be edited and cut off. And in this way, we would move from one area to another thanks to censorship and from one status to another. So this show is an interactive and improvised one, and like every improvised show, there is something we agreed upon, something that is being decided. For instance, what happens from A to B is left for the moment, and as an actress, I was supposed to be ready for anything, and on the basis and to react accordingly. And this is what happened. For instance, in other shows, the same happened. Tanya would start the show before the public would show up, would send her to swim and to dive, and she would swim before the public would arrive with the fishermen. And while being there, she would run into divers or fishermen, and each time they would tell her stories, or an incident would occur. One of the incidents, one of those who were diving told her, do you know that this is water waste where you are swimming? And of course she couldn't change the itinerary because she was waiting for the public. But this story does not end here. The story was added to the show and became a part of the show in the following days. And any story we would get from the public or from any person who would meet with would be added to that show. So the shows would be changing continuously. One of the things that would attract us in the live art, on the living art shows, is that it is ephemeral. What some things would disappear with time, and what is left is archives, some images, videos, some excerpts or audio excerpts. But we noticed that the live of those shows we worked on are different from other ones that we did with other people. Actually, as Petra has said, we were working on building relations with societies or communities who wouldn't know about, like the fishermen, the divers, or the local activists in a given place. And we, as activists, as ladies, as artists, as citizens, we worked on these shows, and we had to cross the borders. Once, one of the and during our lecture at American University, we were asked when will these shows come to an end. We said never. It is an ongoing process, and we would be using different projects and we would also, or it will depend on the results of other researchers or on journalistic articles. So these shows are becoming artistic or political or research or related to research or are legal. As Petra has said, it started with tours and trips where we would follow the train lines. Then we moved to Nothing to Declare and then to videos. And we asked ourselves when we did the show happen when we shared it with the people, or we played our roles on the checkpoints, or was it when we decided to act in a different way in different areas, or is it when we crossed the borders in Akkar, Nakura, and Bika with all their problems and the troubles we have there? Our performance took place only when we stopped at the army checkpoints where we were allowed to leave. Because imagine us, the three of us, in a very in our society, which is a male society. They think that we as women are not a source of danger, whether on a security or a political basis. So this basic show takes place each time we share it with our public.
إذا حدا عنده أسئلة.
If you have any questions. And there's the booklet for Mashita Tarikam, and I'll show you Nothing to Declare in Arabic and in English.
أعطيهم شوية وقت. ثانك يو. إذا ما حدا عنده أسئلة شكراً.